Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Rye, Rybrook, and Port Chester Virtual Candidate Forum for the Office of Port Chester Board of Education Trustee. I am Douglas French, President of the League. The school board election and budget vote will take place on Tuesday, May 17th from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at your local elementary school, one of the 4 elementary schools. Should you need more information on that, you can find it at the portchesterschools.org website. Qualified voters will vote in person for this election and the budget. We've received many topics and questions from the residents of Port Chester. Our goal tonight is to educate the voters on the people that will make decisions impacting their schools. Welcome, candidates, and thank you for your willingness to serve or continue to serve the community. The election is 3 candidates for 2 positions on the board. By virtual draw, we will have, in order of opening statements, first, George Floyd. Welcome, George. Second, Chrissy Onofrio. Hello, Chrissy. And third, Deidre Pascal McMahon. That'll be the order of the opening statements. The program format will be 2 minutes per candidate for opening statements, 1.5 minutes for each candidate to answer a question. We'll have about 10 to 12 questions, and 30-second rebuttal after each candidate has answered a question. The candidate has to acknowledge that they would like to rebut a point of fact or expand on a point of statement, but not any personal statements or attacks. And then we'll have 2 minutes closing statements. Our timekeepers tonight are Barbara Brunner and Roz Lahr, who will hold a 30-second sign when 30 seconds are left, and a stop sign when time is up. And the moderator will allow you to finish your sentence, but not continue your train of thought. The replay of this forum will be available on our YouTube channel, the League of Women Voters Rye, Rybrook, and Port Chester. It'll be allowed for closed captioning and language preferences, and it will be on our webpage and our Facebook page, as well as on the public access education TV station. Our moderator tonight is Catherine Daring. She's a resident of Bedford and is a co-president of the League of Women Voters of Northeast Westchester. She's served on and off the board of that local league for the past 15 years. And she also has a background as chief financial officer in community banking, and has also become an author, publishing 2 books, and is working on her 3rd. So welcome, Catherine. The program is yours.
All right, thanks, Doug. Good evening, everyone. Doug has gone through the basic setup of the evening, and it's my job to keep everyone on the straight and narrow here, but it should go well. So our 3 candidates, I'll repeat, are going to work in an order that was selected ahead of time, and then we're going to rotate through the questions. The first speaking will be an introduction, a 2-minute statement, and the order will be George Ford, then there's my list, then Chrissy Onofrio, and then Deirdre McMahon Pascal. So with that, let's start with George. And yeah.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you, and it seems like deja vu. I guess that is the case. It's take 2 for me. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, my fellow candidates, and our community for being here tonight. Last year, I lost in this same election by just 52 votes. And as I stated in my candidacy letter in last week's newspaper, whether you win or lose at something, it's what you actually do next that ultimately determines your success. I am here tonight because so many parents and community members encourage me to stay the course as I support and respect the needs of both our children and our seniors. 17 years ago, my wife Karen and I moved to Port Chester, coming from neighboring Rye. We have 2 children, George, who is in the 6th grade at the middle school, and Caitlin, who's in the 3rd grade at King Street. Both have only known Port Chester as their home and are proud to be Rams. Since 2011, I've worked in the renewable energy industry, developing large-scale solar and battery storage projects up and down the eastern seaboard. The experience I have in negotiating and securing contracts, financing various government approvals, and construction of these complex projects brings out my greatest abilities to work collaboratively and think critically in today's rapidly changing world. With that said, I'm thrilled to be here again. For years, I've been advocating for our schools and community, participating in the discussions, providing recommendations and solutions to the issues. I served on the Bond Advisory Committee. I've been a class parent each year. I was on the Superintendent Search Committee, the Reopening Task Force, the Facilities and Curriculum Focus Groups, and I coached 2 teams in the Port Chester Youth Baseball League and 1 in the Rye-Town Youth Football League. I've also served on the Village Voting Rights Committee, the Police Reform Committee, and I chaired the Resident Cannabis Committee. I am extremely thankful for the positive changes that we've seen over the last 10 months by our new superintendent, Dr. Enriquez, and our assistant superintendent of finance, Mr. Solano. I will continue to be a great cheerleader and steward for our community. I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to serving once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Chrissy?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum and for the opportunity to be here tonight as well as all of the residents who are taking the time to watch from home. I was born and raised in Port Chester, as were both of my parents and 3 of my grandparents. I am a proud product of the Port Chester public school system and graduated from Port Chester High School in 1999. I completed my undergraduate degree in journalism at New York University and went on to earn a Master's of Science in Teaching at Pace University. I've spent the past 17 years teaching at Ridge Street School in Rybrook. In 2015, my wife and I bought a house on my childhood street in Port Chester, where my parents also still reside. Together, we have 4 daughters, Ryan and Jamie, who are in 6th grade at Port Chester Middle School, Jesse, who's a sophomore at Port Chester High School, and Nicole, who is now a teacher herself and also a proud Port Chester graduate. I'm currently completing my first term on the Board of Education, having spent the last year and a half serving as president. The past 3 years have been full of unexpected twists and turns. My time on the board has been challenging, but it's also been rewarding. I am so excited for the progress that we are making and the direction that we are headed. Amazing things are happening in Port Chester schools. As an alumna, parent, teacher, and homeowner, I bring multiple perspectives to the table. I am proud of how I've conducted myself throughout my first term. I have demonstrated that I am an independent thinker, someone who analyzes each situation, takes in all the information, and forms an opinion for myself. I am looking forward to continuing to work collaboratively with all to continue to move Port Chester schools forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chrissy. Now we'll hear from Deirdre.
Good evening. I'm Deirdre McMahon Pascal. I thank the League of Women Voters for arranging this forum. I thank my fellow candidates for joining me in this important dialogue, and I thank the viewing audience for taking the time to learn about the candidates tonight. Having spent my career in education, I'm eager to bring my experiences and insights from 19 years working with children of varying ages, backgrounds, and abilities to the Board of Education. My husband, Peter, and I both grew up here in Port Chester and have enjoyed raising our 3 children in the community we love. Since our oldest child, Joey, began at King Street 15 years ago, I've been an engaged volunteer in our schools. In addition to serving as a class parent at every grade level, I've chaired numerous events and served as secretary, vice president, and co-president of the King Street School PTA. This service gave me the chance to interact with teachers, students, and their families. As my children aged, my engagement expanded to include serving on the Middle School Band Association Board and the Middle School PTA, where I am currently a recording secretary. I'm an active member of our high school PTSA and the baseball and cheerleading booster clubs. This school year, I have served as the vice president of our football booster club, and I'm currently a co-president of our softball booster club. I've enjoyed working on district focus groups, the middle school reopening task force, and search committees, including the superintendent search last year. My extensive involvement in organizations, clubs, and committees throughout the district has deepened my understanding of the strengths as well as the needs of our students, families, and community. If elected to the Board of Education, I'll prioritize improving educational outcomes while promoting opportunity, inclusivity, and equity for all. I'll focus on improving district communications to support greater engagement. I'll be a responsible steward of district resources, respecting students and taxpayers alike. Above all, I'll work to ensure that the social emotional health of our students is at the core of our planning. This is an exciting time in the Port Chester Public Schools. I'm energized by the opportunity to work on behalf of all Port Chester children with our superintendent, board members, and professional faculty to continue the momentum.
Thank you. We'll now have the questions. The questions were submitted by the people of Port Chester, and I've been given a list of them. The first one, really just, you've already given the answer to it with your opening statements. So I've changed it a little bit. And the order for this, by the way, will be Chrissy, then Deirdre, then George, okay? The question, as I've adjusted it, is what experience have you had that has prepared you to become a Board of Education candidate for Port Chester? Okay, and the first one will be Chrissy.
Great, thank you so much. So my experience certainly is different this time around. So when I participated in the League of Women Voters Forum 3 years ago, I was coming in without any experience. The past 3 years have certainly given me my share of experience as a board member. I was certainly thrown to the fire with, as I mentioned, many unexpected twists and turns. Primarily, the COVID pandemic. I was sworn in July of 2019 and then had to deal with the COVID pandemic shortly thereafter. So I didn't even have a full year of in-person meetings under my belt. But that did not matter, because when you are in a position to make decisions, you have to be ready to make them. So the experience for the last 3 years has certainly given me so much. Being able to hire the new superintendent, the superintendent search committee, that's certainly one of the biggest responsibilities that the Board of Education has. And that was a huge undertaking, and I'm so proud of the outcome of that as well. But certainly getting our district and seeing our district through the COVID-19 pandemic has given us so much experience. And hindsight is always 20/20, being able to see how we handled things and how we can move forward and do things better.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Deirdre. So what experience have you had that prepared you to become a trustee on the board?
Well, as a mother, a teacher, a taxpayer, and an involved community volunteer, I feel very well prepared to take on this role. Growing up here in Port Chester, I was born into a family of service. My dad served on the Board of Trustees when I was a child, and my family's always been dedicated to serving the people of Port Chester. We were taught to bloom where you're planted. And working in education for 19 years, I've worked with children from 3 years old, through the 8th grade at different times in my career. And I feel like I have a broad perspective on the needs and the abilities of children of different backgrounds and ages, and I'm ready to bring that to the board. I have served in our schools in so many capacities as an officer in booster clubs and PTA organizations. I've worked in our community outside of our schools as a Girl Scout leader, soup kitchen volunteer, a CCD teacher. I really engage with the community on so many levels, and I feel like I can bring all of that experience to the board to serve our entire community.
Okay, thank you. George, same question.
Thank you very much. So as the Westmore News stated in their recent article about the 3 candidates, I'm basically at every single board meeting, even through the pandemic, the Zoom meetings, and over the last 10 months since our new superintendent took the lead of our district. I've been at every single meeting, and one of maybe 2 or 3 people. Additionally, my knowledge and research of the district, my knowledge and research of schools, state aid, budgeting, my relationships with teachers and staff members that provide input and feedback to me. We have an open dialogue, a respectful open dialogue. I continually have met with the superintendent, our new superintendent, and new assistant superintendent of finance, Mr. Solano. They have a new open door policy that's allowed me to provide solutions and input, unlike the last 10 years. I come from a family of teachers. I had an aunt who taught in the same classroom for 36 years. And again, my knowledge and experience, my insights from being on various committees, not only in the school district, but also the village, my relationships with the mayor, the board of trustees, Senator Mayor, Mr. Otis, and also Mr. Latimer will help us advocate and continue to make our district thrive.
Thank you. Question 2, the order will start with Deirdre and then George and then Chrissy. The question is, what improvements would you like to see enacted? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. I would say that the primary improvement that I would like to see enacted is improved communications in our school district. While we're making strides in this area, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm a fan of the board docs that are up and running now. I do watch a lot of the board meetings from home, and I find that to be so much more user-friendly, and I really appreciate that. But looking ahead, I know that a new website is on the way, but we've been through that before. I've been here for a long time as a parent in the district. We've been through this before, and a new website is only as good as it is reliable. Currently, our website shows a high school profile from 2017-18. And that's found in our realtor packet. So that's not great communication for our district. Our calendar is incomplete and often inaccurate. It'd be great to see a Google district calendar used so that schools don't schedule events on top of one another. Communication with parents when staff changes during the school year should just be standard policy. Improved communication doesn't need to be a costly undertaking. Little changes can make a powerful impact. So that's one thing that I would make a top priority and would like to see broad change in.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from George.
Sorry, had on mute. Thank you. So a few things. First and foremost, one of the things that I would like to see changed and improved immediately is our screening process for children who are first coming into our district, whether that's in pre-K, whether that's in 4th grade, or it's in 11th grade. This is going to help our district immensely. I think we have an opportunity here in our screening process to really vet and change how our children are being, the resources are being allocated towards them, and where specifically we need to use our new state aid funding. Our core academic foundation, which is the root of our kids' growth, our children's growth, I think sometimes is lost. And our screening processes need to be this, we really need to step those up. That's going to save us time, it's going to save us resources, and it's going to help our kids in the long run. The more early intervention we can have in understanding how a child can learn, if they have a disability, whether it's OT, they need PT, or special education services, which go hand in hand. That process as a whole, I think, needs to be improved. And if it does, again, it's going to help us grow as a district. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chrissy?
Thank you. One of the major things that I've talked a lot about is transparency. And I think that we need to continue sharing as much information as we can. As Deirdre mentioned, the addition of board docs, which I was instrumental in implementing, has been a huge step forward for our district, where the public can see all of the documents that the Board of Education gets to see. And really, it was a long time coming that every other district in Westchester was using this program. There was no reason that we weren't. But as we continue to develop this data-driven culture where decisions are based on facts and information, and not just on emotions and opinions, we need to continue sharing this academic data. STAR data, our students' STAR academic data, is now being presented publicly 3 times a year at board meetings. Our contract with Innovair that will start next year is going to help us in analyzing this data and sharing this data so that everyone can see exactly where our students stand. But as far as the next steps, we need to continue to focus on academic achievement for all of our students. And Dr. Enriquez has put the priority and the focus back on curriculum and instruction, which has been lacking for many years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will go first to George, then Chris, then Deirdre. The question is, what are the most critical issues facing the school district? And how would you handle addressing them? So George, you'll go first.
Thank you again for the question. Again, over the last 10 years and coming from as a parent of 2 young children in this district, my son being in the district now going on his 7th year, or actually, 7 years in the district, we have consistently seen our scores and our metrics falling. And with a new leader here in Dr. Enriquez, a true leader, she is making those data-driven decisions now. I think it's critical that we, again, as Chrissy just stated, our decisions are not based on emotions. We're looking at and analyzing the data to determine where our children need the resources. I'm thankful that in this new budget last year and coming into this year, that we were able to hire back and add in the RTI teachers, response to intervention. This is so important. And this is going to be, again, as I will continue to focus on, and I have said over the last 5 years, as I've spoken at board meetings, the core academic foundation, we need to stabilize that and make sure the ABC 1, 2, 3s are being met first. And then we could start to look at the wants and the need, instead of the wants and desires from that point, and adding the enrichment programs from that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chrissy, do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure, thank you.
So what are the critical issues, the most critical issues facing the school district? And how would you handle addressing them?
Thank you. So there are so many, as we've referenced, there's so many amazing things that are currently happening in Port Chester. Certainly consistency is something that we'll talk a lot about too. There's currently the effort as part of our efforts to improve academic excellence for all of our students and achievement, the effort to make all of our elementary schools more consistent by adding the elementary ELA curriculum, so that there's more consistency amongst the elementary schools and that all of our students are receiving similar instruction. But beyond the academics, if we really want to talk about something that's a critical issue that's facing our district, I think it's a critical issue that's facing everyone in the world right now, and that's the mental health crisis. I think that it cannot be ignored, the fact that our students, all of us, but especially our students, have been through a collective trauma over the last 2 years. And we have many resources in place. We are very fortunate that we've been able to hire so many new staff members, psychologists, guidance counselors, social workers. We have great connections with Family Services of Westchester and Open Door. But it's one thing to have those things in place. It's also ensuring that our students and our staff and our families are utilizing them. So I think that that's certainly something that needs to be given more attention to make sure that we are publicizing all the offerings that are there for our students, but certainly to address from our youngest students to our oldest students, because it certainly has impacted everyone differently. But the social emotional needs that certainly after the last 2 years have been critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Deirdre, most critical issues facing the district?
Yes, I'd like to piggyback off of what Chrissy had to say. The social emotional recovery and attention to pandemic-induced learning gaps in our students continue to be priorities that are critical, and they probably will be for many years to come. Having 3 children in our schools when COVID hit, at the time I had a high school senior, a sophomore, and a 6th grader. And so I witnessed firsthand how differently the circumstances affected different children. Didn't look the same in each child. Our country's experiencing higher rates of mental health crises and suicide in young people than ever before. Effective teaching can't take place when mental health makes a student unavailable to instruction. I appreciate the district prioritizing Maslow's hierarchy over Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm glad to see that we've added 6 psychologists and 2 social workers at Edison School. In addition to mental health support professionals, dynamic curriculum, such as the drone program being piloted at the middle school, rich athletic amusement programs, and co and extracurricular activities provide engaging opportunities to re-engage our children. Balancing concerns for mental health with the need to fill in learning gaps is really going to be a challenge. Many summers, having summer school for all this year, all students are eligible grades K through 8. That's a great way to address those gaps. But since learning gaps vary among students, I imagine that the RTI periods will be exceedingly busy, and therefore we need to provide our teachers with the resources and support and professional development to support children through this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question, Chrissy will go first, then Deirdre, then George. The question is, what Board of Education activities have you participated in or will you participate in? And how will that make a difference in the new board?
All right, thank you so much. So as a current board member, I have participated in all of our public sessions as well as retreat sessions, executive sessions, and I don't think that I've ever missed a meeting. So I have certainly made myself available and shown that I'm dedicated. In addition, I am always available. Certainly with our new superintendent, the communication has increased and is constant. We kind of joke that it just never stops between emails and messages and phone calls. So I certainly have been an available board member. In addition to that, I've also participated in functions with Westchester Putnam School Board Association, as well as New York State School Board Association. In some ways, the COVID pandemic has made participation in those things easier, as so many of them have become virtual. So through those, I've been able to connect with other board members in other districts, which has been really powerful for me as well, because being able to hear what other districts are dealing with and how they're navigating different things, but always trying to gather as much information as I possibly can. New York State School Board Association is also great in terms of podcasts and webinars and other professional development for board members. So I've certainly taken advantage of everything that I possibly could and will continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. Next is Deirdre.
So I began engaging with the Board of Education as a non-trustee when my oldest children were very young. I think my middle child, CJ, was in kindergarten when I participated in the district advisory committee and presented findings to the board and interacted with the board regularly. Since then, I've also been in different committees, the facilities and focus group, and what was the other one we just did? Curriculum focus group, as well as search committees. I've been involved with search committees for teachers, also for a principal, working with administration as well as our superintendent search committee. I've attended and spoken at Board of Ed meetings many times over the years since becoming a parent in our district. But as is the case with many others, my in-person attendance has ebbed and flowed as the needs of my family evolved. With young children involved in many activities and a spouse that worked in the city, attendance wasn't always feasible for my family. But fortunately, with the evolution of technology, I've been allowed to watch meetings from home. Board of Education meetings are frequently the soundtrack to my dinner preparation and sometimes even our family dinners. When I have concerns, I email the appropriate party, the board member, the superintendent, other administrators, and I do that regularly. My communications are always respectful and productive. One thing that's never wavered is my interest in the business of our district and my participation in committees, and even with the PT council meetings, we met with the superintendent and administrators regularly, and I've appreciated all those opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. George, do you want me to repeat the question?
Not necessary, thank you. So again, being that I am at each and every meeting, one of the things that I've advocated over the years to the Board of Education is to having additional board meetings. And at the very least, whether it not be adding one extra meeting a month, I would advocate to have 6 additional meetings. Why 6? We have 6 buildings. I think it would be great to have the public come in during those secondary meetings, tour our facilities, have a more intimate discussion instead of just a business meeting where policy making is being done. One when you involve the community, like we saw with various committees on both the school district and the village committees, people start to understand what's needed, what the truth is. And that happened with the bond advisory committee. We obviously did a tremendous amount of work to have a bond put up and passed in this community. We have beautiful facilities now that we could showcase, and we have more work to still do. And I think, having those extra meetings will really bring our community together, get everybody off of Facebook and behind their computers. And while technology is great, we've also learned it's also bad. So I think having extra meetings and advocating, as I have in the past, for resident committees like a curriculum, finance, and buildings and grounds committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This next question, I think you've already answered part of it, but I'll emphasize the second part of it. Is it the district's role, the question asks, is it the district's role to help families whose children need mental health and substance abuse support? Why and why not? And how should the district handle this? So you've mentioned the support for mental health, but this goes further into substance abuse. And I think it seems to be asking, what is the role of the school board in dealing with this? And you as an individual trustee on that board in determining how big of a response to give or how much support to give for these issues. Okay, and this one will be addressed first by Deirdre, then George, and then Chrissy. So Deirdre?
Okay. I've always been a fan of the proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And while our families are the primary teachers, first teachers, instruction, and most important teachers of values and character, it is important for our schools to take a role in educating the whole child. As I mentioned earlier, a child that's suffering with mental health crisis in any form, whatever that is, whether it's anxiety or substance abuse or anything, they're not available to instruction. And therefore, they can't move forward. Our job as educators is to meet each child where they are and move them forward. And if a child is suffering with an issue such as that, then we need to work with the family, not instead of the family, not in place of the family, but we need to work with families to help the children move forward. And I know that the staff in our schools are very sensitive to these topics and very professional, and I really appreciate and respect the way they handle themselves. It's a challenge because, like I said earlier, we do need to balance the rigorous teaching that we want to do with these crises that our children are experiencing, and whether it's bullying, harassment, substance abuse, unhappy people do unhappy things, and it's nobody wants to be unhappy, and if we can help them, it is our responsibility.
Okay, thank you. George, same question.
So, it's interesting. My wife works on a behavioral health outpatient department for a city hospital, and we often have discussions about mental health and what's going on in our country right now. It also, this is a great question, and I just met a resident recently about a week ago who just moved into Port Chester, who works at another Westchester County school district, and we talked about this exact subject, specifically to the point of where does a school have to draw a line in providing that assistance. Schools are academic institutions, and I'll go back to my initial statement before about screening, early intervention, whether that's going to be for, again, special education services, mental health, or other issues that a child may have. We need to get in front of these soon and quick. But there is a line in the sand where the district has to, at some point with mental health, bring in true professionals from the outside and recommend parents and families to get the true help that they need from maybe a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And again, at different levels and at different ages, that will vary of what that looks like. But I think I will continue to advocate for early intervention and really having a rigorous screening process on day one from when we touch these children when they come into our district.
Okay, thank you. Chrissy, same question.
Thank you. Certainly, I know everyone understands that the role of the Board of Education is to set policy. However, with that said, there has to be a joint effort in terms of the wellness of all of our students. As I mentioned before, we're very fortunate that we have a partnership with Family Services of Westchester as well as Open Door, in addition to the numerous staff members that we have within our school buildings. But as Mr. Ford referenced, right, those services sometimes can only take you so far. So I think it's very important that the school district is involved. I think it's very important that the school district does a better job at making sure that all of our families understand what supports are in place, and that education for our students in terms of their mental health and wellness and mindfulness and drug and substance abuse, that starts at an early age before our students get to this point, to the point of abusing drugs and alcohol and other substances. This is also not something new. It certainly has been made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, but seeing students, especially high school students, deal with stresses in negative ways is certainly not a new issue, but we need to just make sure that all of our parents and our families are well aware of the support system. And as Ms. Pascal said, it takes a village, and we all have to make sure that we're supporting each other and reaching all of our students. And most importantly, as we said, if our students are not available to learn, then where are we? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to change the subject a little bit now, get to some money matters. The next question, we're going to change the order as well, and it will be Chrissy, then George, then Deirdre. And the question is, what are your thoughts regarding the proposed budget? There's a 0% tax increase. Is this good or bad? Please explain your position with some details.
Thank you. I'm so glad. I was hoping that you would ask this question. First and foremost, I absolutely support the proposed school budget. This year, our school budget is growing over $9 million, and we are able to do that without increasing the amount of money that we're collecting from our taxpayers. The district has seen the promise of foundation aid come to fruition, with roughly $6 million increased this current school year, another $9 million next year, with another $9 million increase the following year. We have also seen an influx of aid from the federal government in the amount of over $15 million. All of this increased funding has allowed us to restore programs that have previously been cut, make additions to programs and staffing, and also improve our buildings and facilities. We added over 60 positions last year with another 15 next year. While I understand that there are concerns over not utilizing the full tax cap, for too many years, our taxpayers carried the burden of making up for the funding that we were lacking, especially given the difficult financial times that most people are facing right now. This is a fiscally responsible budget. We need to spend wisely, and we need to spend with a plan. I want to be very clear that we are not giving anyone a break. We aren't returning any money to anyone. In this year's budget, we are simply not increasing the amount of money that comes from the taxpayers. The fact that we can do that and still grow our budget $9 million is a win-win to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from George.
I could speed it up and just say I echo everything that Chrissy said, but
That's fine.
I mean,
You could explain what foundation aid is. I didn't understand.
Sure. So listen, Chrissy, you and I for 3 years, and going back to when you first ran for the Board of Education 3 years ago, one of the main things was efficient spending. And here we are today, where many people advocated and asked the state to step up and give us the money that we deserved to assist our students and our children in this community. Yes, right on the front page, I specifically pulled it out. There it is. it says $9.47 million budget to budget increase. We're still charging the taxpayers the same almost $70 million. There's no breaks, as Chrissy said. I fully support this budget. We are, again, adding programming. We're adding teachers. We're adding staff. We're buying the things we need for our district maintenance staff. And the taxpayers who have funded not only the budgets over the years, but 2 bonds, $80 million and $11 million. They're just simply not having to see an increase on their tax bill this year. Now, some people will say, well, there may be a reduction. Yes, there may be. However, we cannot forget our small business owners, which are going to see in this 0% tax levy budget an 11.33% increase. They need the help too in this
All right.
pandemic. Thank you.
You've had your time. Okay. We'll next hear from Deirdre.
Well, I've never in my life not supported a school budget. I'll support the budget. The alternative is always too risky. No one ever wants to see the effects of a contingency budget, right? But this has certainly been an unusual year in terms of the budget process. New York State enacted the tax cap legislation 11 years ago, and that's the first time that the public's ever been asked to support a 0% tax levy increase. The board was divided in this decision in supporting this budget, and I understand where each side was coming from. There are significant concerns around the loss of income over 10 years, looking at about $30 million that we could have had. Yeah, I felt that the right solution would have been for the board to compromise and meet in the middle, particularly when Mr. Russo suggested the compromise, including the lighting project that would have provided an immediate savings. But I wish there was more public input into the budget during the development process. It takes a village to pass a budget, but not all facets of the public were involved. Unfortunately, it seems that our parent-teacher organizations felt excluded. I believe we can improve upon our budget development process next year and involve all stakeholders in the process. This will help us build consensus and move forward. The line-by-line presentation included a slide noting that we shouldn't add staff and programs without data to indicate they're needed. I totally respect and agree with that. But I would hope that our board has always considered need and always had a plan before spending. I assume that most taxpayers like myself would expect that's what's happening every year. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I rebut?
Yes, you could rebut. And George,
Okay.
did you want to rebut as well? Okay, first Chrissy, 30 seconds. for a
Thank you so
rebuttal.
much. I just wanted to address a few things. First and foremost, this was our new superintendent's first budget process, so I think things may have been a little bit different than they were done in the past. So some people, I think, were not quite used to that. I think also, as I mentioned before, hindsight is 20/20, and there were board meetings back from February where the budget was discussed. I think the problem of the board is that we assumed people were engaged when they were not, obviously watching when the board was unanimous in these discussions and positive in February and March. And it wasn't until April that we really started to have some discussions where there was some dissent. I also just want to bring up the idea of a compromise.
Stop.
Okay.
That
Oh,
should
so
be-
it's 30 seconds, sorry.
I know, but it's a 30-second rebuttal.
No
So it
problem.
comes out at 30 seconds.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, she held up the wrong way. Okay, George, you wanted to rebuttal as well?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'll finish Chrissy's thought. I remember last year specifically, there was, a talk of doing 0% last year, and we used the full tax levy last year. So I think the compromise was already made. But the 2 points I want to make: we never, ever had budget meetings in February. This is the first year we ever had a budget presentation in February before the meeting. And to say that, there was a lack of information is just false. This superintendent has been transparent, open door policy. And top of that, Ossining did 0 last year, and they did a negative tax levy this year.
Okay, thank you. We're good. The next, another rebuttal. Okay.
Okay, just to clarify, I didn't say that there was a lack of information. I said that I think that our PT organizations did not feel included in the process. Our PT council meetings, I understand this year I understand things are, there's a learning curve, and I mean no disrespect, but our PT council meetings, I used to be involved with those, and we were kind of brought along and, with an understanding of what was happening. So my point is that I hope moving forward that our Spanish-speaking parents and our PT organizations are involved in the budget process. And while it may have happened started back in February, our parents are very engaged with the work of our schools. Thank you.
Our next question is on almost the same topic, so perhaps you didn't need the rebuttals. And this one, the responses will be first from George, then Deirdre, then Chrissy. The question is, are there specific areas of the proposed budget that you feel should be improved upon or cut? That's the question. And George, you go first.
Yeah, so again, over the years, we have, neglected to do certain things in our district. And that's because previous boards were against using the budget to take care of our facilities. They felt that that should be separate and apart from the educational part of the budget. But everybody has to remember, buildings and grounds, the cost of electricity, the cost of repairs, the cost of, machinery to operate our schools, whether it's boilers, this is part of the budget. And this is the first year that we finally have seen money being put into a maintenance line item. It's been quite some time. We've continued to add money into our tax certiorari account, which is great to protect us there. Unfortunately, we've seen other districts like Rye Brook where they've had to do bonds to pay back tax certiorari's. We are in great shape. Mr. Solano has done a wonderful job coming in as our Assistant Superintendent of Finance. We've allocated our resources correctly over the last 12 months. And I think to analyze and take a step back, yes, we do need to analyze and assess where we're spending money. Unfortunately, for example, we put in 4 library clerks last year into the budget. We only hired 3 of them, and King Street School did not hire a library clerk. And to date, our library is being used as 6 offices. So we do need to analyze and assess before we continue to spend. Thank you.
Okay. Deirdre?
May I ask you to repeat the question, please?
Sure. Are there specific areas in the proposed budget which you feel should be improved upon or cut?
Okay, well, first I would like to just start with a positive and mention that there are certain things that I'm really enthusiastic about. In addition to the extra support for mental health services, I really am excited that we've increased the SAT prep availability and funding. Mr. Solano, the Assistant Superintendent for Business Affairs, he stated at a meeting that we have tens of millions of dollars worth of capital projects to be done. Tens of millions of dollars. It sounds like a lot of need. What could be more important than ensuring, as Mr. Ford referred to, ensuring that our students and staff are safe and in healthy facilities? If we had compromised on the tax levy at the 1%, perhaps we could have chipped away at a little bit more of that. But aside from capital improvements, additional funding to some extra and co-curricular activities would support our students in their development to be well-rounded citizens and also attractive college applicants. More STEM-oriented clubs like a science Olympiad would be great. I'm familiar with many students that look to be engineers and future scientists who long for these opportunities. I respect that this is not the right year for this, but speaking aspirationally, I'd also like to see additional guidance counselors at the high school who can focus specifically on the college process. I'm finishing that for the 2nd time this year with my high school senior, our 2nd child. Our guidance staff is amazing, but they're stretched very thin. They're creating schedules for every grade, freshmen through seniors, and the college process is weighing on them greatly. Thank you.
I had muted myself, sorry. Chrissy, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. So I certainly, as I said, I support this current budget. Look, there's always going to be areas where you can spend money. But we have to remember that this is not just our money to spend. And as we've said, we need to have a plan. Currently, we are updating our 5-year facilities plan, and that will give us the information we need of where we can strategically spend and where the greatest needs are. Our reserves are all in really good shape, as Mr. Solano has reported, that we are in good shape. So God forbid we have an emergency or we need to pay a tax surcharge, that we have the money there. In addition, this year's budget, it's adding teachers. We're adding a bilingual speech and language therapist, a high school and middle school bilingual math teacher, computer science teacher at the middle school. We are continuing to add and add and add. The lighting project that was mentioned, we are doing it. We're doing it over the course of 2 years because it's an expensive project that will, in the long run, save us money. So we decided to do it wisely, and that there's money in this year's budget to do the first part, which we may actually be able to do more than that, and then to finish that project next year. We're also increasing our contract with our security firm. We're increasing professional development as well as the SAT prep and even a lawnmower. So the needs are there. And I want people to understand too, that these decisions are made over the course of an entire school year with input that the superintendent receives from her cabinet members and from the administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question again deals with, oh, sure.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say, Ms. Pascal, I agree with you. It would be great to add additional high school guidance counselors. My concern is that we hired between last year and this year 75 employees. And when we did that, we didn't think about where these employees were going to sit. And as I just stated, and I know we only have so much time, and that's why I just wanted to come back to this quickly, is again, 75 employees need a desk to sit at somewhere during the day. Space is constrained. It's limited. So we have to think about those things. And again, with a new superintendent only 10 months in, we have to give her a chance. Thank you.
Okay, this will be the final question on budget. So we're going to cover some territory we've already covered, but the question is, Port Chester has had a recent influx of foundation aid. And I would like that defined a little bit better. Some of the people in the audience might not really understand it. Where do you think the foundation aid should be allocated? Do you see it as a discrete source of money that's spent only on certain things, or does it just go into the general budget? So that's the question, foundation aid. And the order will be Deirdre, then Chris, then George.
So the fulfillment of foundation aid is one of the most exciting things to happen in our district in a long time, that along with the construction projects with the bond. But as a PTA member and an officer who long advocated for the appropriate funding, I was so excited for the children to have programs restored that they'd gone without for so long. I was grateful to see that in the first year, so many staffing positions and programs were restored. Moving forward, it would be prudent to use some foundation to address capital projects. As I mentioned, Mr. Solano referred to tens of millions of dollars in capital projects, so I don't need to go over that. Take your pick. The gym floor at the middle school needs to be replaced. I know people who have been tripping in holes in the floor. It's not safe. Overcrowding at JFK needs to be addressed. A traffic study was recently done at 2 of the schools, and I was surprised, to be honest with you, that the middle school was left out. I would like to see funds used to do a traffic study at the middle school as well. The safety at arrival and dismissal there is of great concern. I would like to see a study on how effective it would be to bus children from 1.5 miles to the middle school instead of just 2 miles. That would reduce absences, tardiness rates, and also reduce the traffic at the middle school. Aside from capital projects, we could increase the number of students who participate in vocational technical programs at BOCES. Greater financial support for our band and athletic programs would be a good use of foundation aid. Putting lights on the beautiful new football field would make it a source of income for the groups that use it. Such an investment would allow us to host competitions that would generate revenue for our programs. I see my time is up.
Thank you. Chrissy?
Thank you. First, to answer your question about foundation aid, it's somewhat complicated, but also somewhat simple. And I think the people of Port Chester are pretty familiar with this because we've long fought for foundation aid. So the idea of foundation aid, it was established back in 2007, I believe it was, for New York State as a way to kind of level the playing field, and it took into account district wealth and student need. So Port Chester for a long time should have been receiving a certain amount of foundation aid based on this calculation, but unfortunately it never really came to fruition until recently for the actual calculations that were put in place to be fully funded. So we are now finally seeing the funding that we should receive based on our wealth and student need. So that's the first part. In terms of foundation aid, I think it makes sense for it to go into our budget for things that we want to continue to see. So whether it's programming or things like that. Yes, we always want to put money into our capital improvement plan, but we've also we've been spending wisely in terms of the federal money that we've received. That's a one-time funds to spend that funding on things that are one-time costs, such as putting air conditioning into all of our schools and upgrading things like the phone systems, roofs on buildings. So costs that are not costs that we're going to see year after year. But the foundation aid is certainly money that, while we're seeing an increase now, we will certainly hope to continue to see that money, but we need to put it towards our student needs and to make sure that we are spending it where it's needed most.
Okay, thank you. George, foundation aid.
Foundation aid, sorry, I forgot to answer your question earlier, and thank you. So look, I wish there was a money tree, somewhere on one of our school grounds. It would be great. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The money doesn't grow on a tree. The taxpayers work hard for their money. There's a line in the sand that we have to be respectful of how much people can handle. And again, this community, time in and time out, has come to the table. They have done their fair share. And yes, the foundation aid should be used as part of the budget. Where the money is placed at that point in time in the budget is going to be determined by the superintendent and her cabinet, as Ms. Onofrio pointed out. There's nobody that should dispute that any one of us are not for the children. We're all for the children, but we have to respect where the bills get paid and who they get paid by. We have seniors and we have children. Those are our two most important subgroups in our community. They go hand in hand. And we have seniors living on fixed incomes. We have, as Ms. Pascal pointed out, a population that may be underserved, and they're living in rental properties. If we're raising taxes to a point on the homeowner that owns that property, eventually they're going to have to raise their rent. So again, it's a balancing act, but everybody should know that all three of us here are all for the children.
All right, thank you. Yes, you have a request for a rebuttal?
Yes, if you don't mind. I just want to kind of piggyback onto what Ms. Onofrio was saying with, the money being owed to us and finally coming in. It just reminds me that, like, one of the concerns that I have is that political winds are fickle. And, as administrations change, we don't know when we're going to be frozen or frozen out. So it's something we want to be cautious of. And I also agree with Mr. Ford about respecting the taxpayer, and that's why I would like to see some of the foundation aid used in things that aren't going to build long-term salary and insurance costs into the budget, which are the things that I tried to bring up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll switch the topic to curriculum, basically. Oh, George, you wanted a rebuttal?
Just one addition, and that's exactly why the plan was to allocate money into a maintenance, a capital fund line, almost $2 million this year, so that at some point where we're starting to see these increases, and if the foundation aid is frozen, and by the way, the foundation will be frozen, right? But it's frozen not at the 22 million that we saw, 10 years ago. Our new base is going to be $50 million. Okay, so yes, and we're going to be able to allocate money from these other accounts that we're using to fix things in our school district, the facilities, and eventually move that money into the budget as needed.
Okay, thank you. So now will be questions on curriculum. And the first question is, and by the way, the order on this one will be Chrissy, then George, then Deirdre. The first question is, how can student achievement be improved at all levels while ensuring that our graduates are prepared for the future? So Chrissy, you're first.
Thank you. Well, as an elementary school teacher, this is certainly an area that I feel somewhat qualified to answer, and that I certainly see the importance in. Student achievement, right, can be measured in all different ways. Certainly, we've talked a lot about data. Most recently, we've talked a lot about STAR assessments, which are computer-based assessments that our students in elementary school through 8th grade take on the computer 3 times a year, at least 3 times a year, in both reading and in math, and in some cases both in Spanish and in English. We can't possibly know how our students are achieving if we don't know where they stand. So we have to have ways to track their progress, to monitor their progress, and we also then have to use that data and put in action plans. So our new assistant superintendent of curriculum, Dr. Carroll, has certainly taken the lead on this with presenting this STAR information, but then also taking it to the next step, whether it's providing teachers with the professional development that they need, helping our teachers to understand how to interpret this data, and then how to apply that to their classroom and to the instruction and to see the needs of our students. And again, I focus more on the elementary level because that's where we need to make the difference so that by the time our students are at middle school and high school, we're not seeing them so far behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from George.
Could you just repeat the question?
Sure. How can student achievement be improved at all levels while ensuring that our graduates are prepared for the future?
Yeah, so thank you. You know, one of the things that one of my first meetings with the new superintendent, we discussed in that meeting the need for a base curriculum in our elementary schools. We had 4 different elementary school curriculums at each of our elementary schools, and there was no unification across the board. Mr. Swift, our principal at the middle school, he could literally tell you if he had a bandana over his eyes by, you know, a child's reading and writing what school they actually came from, which elementary school. So I think from, you know, the fact that, again, and I'll harp on this over and over, initial screenings, core academic foundation needs to be built. It is imperative that we start with the basics. One of the things Chrissy and I talked about when I was running last year was, you know, a campaign slogan, you know, go back to the basics. It's not going back to the basics. It's reinforcing the basics, the core academic foundation for children, making sure, hey, we know ABC 1, 2, 3. We just recently saw the U.S. News and World Report come out of high school rankings. I'm extremely concerned that 1 out of 4 children in Port Chester are not graduating. We need to have some serious discussions on why that is and what we could do to change that. I'm hoping the Principals Focus Academy, the Principals Promise Academy is a start for that, and it's a great idea, and we need to do more for those kids. So thank you.
Finally, we'll hear from Deirdre.
Okay, may I ask you to repeat it one more time? I apologize.
I had just muted myself because my clock is chiming.
Okay.
You get the chiming in the background. The question is, how can student achievement be improved at all levels while ensuring that our graduates are prepared for the future?
Okay. Well, certainly we're moving in the right direction with some of the things we're seeing now. The partnership with Innovare will help us as a repository for data. And obviously data-based action plans will help teachers inform instruction. And that's an incredibly useful tool, as is aligning the ELA curriculum that's going on right now. And I imagine that that will move across the curriculum as well. But in so doing, we need to be respectful of the different cultures at each of the schools and understand that the needs are not, you know, it's not a cookie cutter. We can't try a cookie cutter approach because education doesn't work that way. The demographics may be different. The children are different. The needs are different. And we need to be respectful of that. You know, as they age, opportunity, to be honest with you, I think is what works best. My oldest is in college now, and he was given the opportunity to study music production in high school. And next year he's doing a semester studying in Nashville through his university. And it's exciting. That's unique to him. None of his friends did that. He has friends with IB diplomas and, friends with VOTEC, who did VOTEC training at BOCES. The more opportunity we can provide and, access to those opportunities is what they need in order to succeed. And I hope that we continue to provide more and more opportunities for our children as they grow.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We'll hear first from George on this one. What are your thoughts on how to improve specific programs? For example, special ed, English as a second language, gifted students, and something called IB. And I don't know what that is.
So, I and again, I'm going to continue to repeat myself. Core academic foundation is so important for our children. We can offer all types of programming, specialized and unique classroom options at the elementary school level, like IB or dual language. And in the end, what we have to do is we need to ensure that our children are learning to read and write and be proficient, and making sure that our standardized tests are meeting New York State guidelines. I'm all for having a biliteracy program for children, but it's not for every student. We need to ensure that those children are being screened and placed into these programs that can handle these programs. For example, Mamaroneck has a dual language program, but it's only held at one elementary school. Same thing with Ossining. There are limited spaces for these type of enrichment programs, and we should absolutely offer various programs for different levels of education for each child. However, one size does not fit all. And again, we have to start with the core academic foundation. We need to ensure that those children can be in those programs, those specialty programs. And we certainly need the screen to help our kids at an early onset for special education services.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deirdre.
I'm reminded when you asked the question, I couldn't help but think when I started teaching, and my first year was under my belt, and people would say to me, oh, now you have everything all done, so next year you can just keep taking out what you did and do, and you're all set. And I thought, people just don't always understand. No self-respecting teacher really behaves that way, because the students that come to their room every year are new and different and have different needs and interests. And so I appreciate that the teachers in our schools adapt and evolve as the needs of our students do. I couldn't agree more with Mr. Ford that, that the basic competencies have to be at the core of what we do. I totally agree with that. But I also think that some of the unique opportunities that we provide here in Port Chester are exciting, and I appreciate them. The first dual language cohort of students that Port Chester ever had are seniors this year with my son. My children couldn't participate because at the time it was only at Park Avenue, but his friends from Park Avenue are fluent in 2 languages, and research indicates that the best chance for being fluent in more than one language is when both of those languages start before the age of 10. Our graduates that speak 2 languages are at an advantage, as are our students in IB programs. My nephew, just more anecdotal information, my own nephew graduated college early with his IB diploma and saved thousands and thousands of dollars in tuition. College costs are one of the things that holds many families back in Port Chester. Opportunity, creates experience.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't get a definition for IB.
IB is the International Baccalaureate Program. It's yes, it's another approach. It's kind of a more global approach to studies. In Port Chester, we have it really only in the high school grades, like well, we do pre-IB. Both of my boys have had pre-IB classes in 9th and 10th grade, but then took IB classes in 11th and 12th. And the district, I believe Ms. Onofrio could speak to, is looking at moving that downward.
Okay. It's a totally new term for me. My grandsons have graduated from high school, so I've been out of the field for a while. Okay, Chrissy, the question is, what are your thoughts on improving special programs?
Thank you. Yes, and IB is certainly one of the opportunities that we can offer our students that we are extremely proud of. As with everything, whether it's our bilingual or dual language program or special ed programs for our students, we need to make sure that we are making consistent decisions that all are headed in the same direction. So I was thinking of a bit of analogy last night. It's a little bit cheesy, but I was thinking about what life was kind of like in Port Chester before Dr. Enriquez arrived. And really, I think the best way to describe it is we had all of these people driving their own cars, and everyone was headed, some people were headed in the same direction. Some people would take a detour or make a U-turn, who got a flat tire, who ran out of gas. So everyone was headed, trying to move forward and trying to continue for their own program. And they all thought that they were making the best decisions for their individual program. And now we have Dr. Enriquez, and she comes and she's driving the bus, and she wants everybody coming on board with her, so that it's not everyone making decisions for themselves, but that we're all headed in the same direction, on board the same bus. If somebody gets a flat tire, we're all there together. But I think that's really what's most important, is that all of these decisions that are being made need to all point back to our board and our district goals for our students.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be answered first.
I have 30 seconds. Sorry.
Oh, are you rebutting something in particular?
Please, just
Yeah.
on this.
Okay.
I just want to add to the point that, we're offering, I think it's 30 IB classes in the high school. And this is tremendous for our students, right? But, the whole picture here is we have to follow the data, and we need to take our teachers' input about each individual child. It is important that, again, we offer programming, but we're not forcing it on children and putting them in a disadvantage and taking them backwards in some of these cases.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, and it'll be answered first by Deirdre, then Chrissy, then George. How do you envision improving communications and engagement between the Board of Ed and the public? Deirdre? You're muted. You're muted.
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I touched on this earlier because this is really kind of at the top of my list. Greater communication equals greater transparency. And I just really think it's the simplest way to make the most powerful impact. I've appreciated the opportunity to work on committees, as I mentioned earlier, and focus groups, but we need more input from the community. I'm excited that we've started this, but at the same time, we need to make a greater effort to include our Spanish-speaking parents on these committees, groups at individual schools where people feel comfortable talking about their needs, will engage them more, greater communication to the public at large, and letting people know about the great things going on at our schools as well. I feel like it's a multi-tiered process. For example, I mentioned earlier, it'd be nice to have lights on the football field. That just sounds like, putting window dressing on, but it's not. If we can create an environment where our community is excited to come and grow together, and there's excitement that's building for band competitions or homecoming games or other activities, I feel like that's also communication. It doesn't end. Again, we have made steps in the right direction, and I appreciate that, but I feel that we have a long way to go.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from George. Is that right?
Thank
No,
you.
wait a minute. I think I got his, oh, Chris. Chrissy goes next, sorry.
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Sure.
Just want to make sure I have it.
How do you envision improving communications and engagement between the Board of Ed and the public?
Okay, thank you. So communication and engagement, as much as they go hand in hand, I think there's two issues there. It's interesting because I have our board goals for this school year. And goal number 1 is to improve communication and ensure systemic equitable access to information. So underneath that, and these were developed with the board along with the superintendent back in July, we have our goal to utilize multiple platforms and outlets to broadcast information, to celebrate and highlight the district's success stories, collaborate and be inclusive more often, to allow for meaningful discourse with key stakeholders, and include opportunity for student voice. So student voice is one that I think we've done a pretty good job at. Certainly at our public board meetings that we've been trying to have our high school students in particular present, not just to be recognized, but also to share. So we've had students come and share some of their experiences and certainly also show off some of their talents with performances. Communication is something I think we're always going to be consistently trying to improve. Again, the development of the new website, our partnership with Syntax to help us do a better job at communicating and also just getting out information. And as we've said, sharing things, sharing all the great things that we are doing, because sometimes we'll get questions about things and someone will ask something and we're like, oh, we're already doing that. And people just don't know because we're not doing a good enough job at sharing it. And then the engagement piece, it certainly is a challenge. As I said, in some ways, COVID has made things easier because people are more willing to log on and watch something, but it also takes away some of that human aspect. So we do need to do a better job at getting people present and involved at things.
Okay, thank you. And now, George, do I need to repeat the question again?
No, and it's interesting as you're doing that, one of my senior citizens neighbors is texting me asking me, where do I vote on the school board? I hope a flyer is going out for that in the mail. There are several things that we could do to improve on. First and foremost, we need to ensure that parents are not getting their information from Facebook. That's the first thing. Look, Dr. Enriquez and Ms. Onofrio, we have a brand new website that's going to be coming soon. It's being worked on now. We have board docs that was finally implemented, and I spoke about that for years, having all of the information in the packet for the public and the taxpayers to see what is going on. A contract is being signed, put the contract in board docs. That's being done now. I'd like to see more from teachers. I've asked teachers, we have to speak up. I know it can become stressful. I think teachers get concerned, but we need to hear their input and their feedback. It is so important. And I think the most dramatic change that we've seen over the last 10 months is our superintendent. She's a wonderful lady. Her door is open. You can call her. You can email her, Miss Maggie, Miss Lewinson. Set up a meeting. She will speak to you. And some members of the community, they're not in favor of that. They really don't want transparency. And we now have a superintendent that is transparent. So we need people to be involved, and we need to have objective and civil discourse here in person and not on Facebook.
Okay, thank you. This will be the last question. And the order will be Chrissy, then George, then Deirdre. And then you will also have your closing statement. But this is the last question. Is there a topic we have not addressed tonight that you would like to cover? Or is there one that you have talked about, but that you would like to expand on? So either a topic we haven't addressed, or you'd like to expand on something. All right. And the first one will be Chrissy.
That's a good question. Thank you. I think that I was expecting a question about one of our greatest strengths as a district. So I want to take a minute to just address that because I think especially with this being Teacher Appreciation Week, I would be remiss if I didn't stress more the importance of our teachers. Our teachers in Port Chester are like no other teachers in any other district. They are the glue that holds everything together, especially over the last 2 years. We've seen our teachers have to pivot, completely changing the way that they deliver instruction to then just change it again, while also contending themselves with a global pandemic. But they were always there for our students. Aside from being a teacher myself, I come from a family of teachers, including my mom, who also taught in Port Chester for many years. The demands that are placed on teachers continue to change and grow. and teachers have had to learn and adapt and truly become a jack of all trades. We have some of the most dedicated and caring teachers that I have ever seen. Our teachers do not just educate our students. For many of our students, they are so much more to them, constantly going above and beyond. And those are the connections and those are the things that will have an impact on our students for the rest of their lives. So I just wanted to make sure that I addressed that also.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
The next person on a topic you'd like to address or something you'd like to expand on will be George.
Thank you. It's a great question. I'm going to say bullying. You know, we recently held, Dr. Enriquez held a superintendent's coffee and chat one night at the middle school, which was great. And Mayor Marino came with a few of his friends. And the topic really out of the gate was about bullying. And, you know, we need to be very cognizant of what goes on. Additionally, Mr. Swift, I want to thank him for inviting the parents to hear from a retired NYPD detective, Tom Grimes, who came in and gave the middle school PTA about an hour and 15-minute presentation on not only technology for adolescents, but also in that presentation was a lot of information about bullying, and it's sad. And one of the things that Mayor Marino and I agreed on is that we need, as parents, to set the example. And unfortunately, that is not happening in this community. We need to change that. People need to start being more respectful. We need to show our children and be the leaders and show them the example of how we should act. If there's anybody out in the community that is reading negative things about me, you've probably never spoken to me. Do me a favor, reach out to me. There's somebody that you know that knows me. Connect with me, have a conversation with me before you draw any conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and finally, we'll hear from Deirdre.
I would just reinforce what Chrissy had to say about our staff. I've been so lucky. Again, for 15 years, my children have been in wonderful care. They were brought into kindergarten with teachers who, I can name Mrs. Glockenberg, right, just specifically, who's retired, but many of you know and love. And right from the start, my children knew that they were in a place that they belonged and that they were cared for. And that's been the difference in their education. As we shift, not shift, but as we add in more effort to be follow a data-driven culture, I just want to caution and remind people that you know, data is super valuable, and we need it to inform instruction, to adapt and make changes, and to assess our learning. But we have to always remember that instruction is designed for students, for human students, not numbers, and that we need to make sure that we're remembering that our students come into school under a certain set of circumstances, and they can change from day to day, from week to week, from year to year. And we want to make sure that we're always putting that at the fore, that our data is a tool in our arsenal, but that that we're being cognizant of the whole child.
All right, thank you. So we've now concluded the question and answer portion of the program, and we will now have the concluding statements. So you will each have 2 minutes for your statement, and you'll go in reverse order from your first statement. So the order will be Deirdre, then Chrissy, then George. Okay. So let's begin with Deirdre.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspectives on our district this evening. I'm running for the Board of Education because I would love to help shape the future of Port Chester schools. As an educator who grew up here in our village, serving on the Board of Education would give me the opportunity to combine my passion for education with my love for the community in which I was born and raised. If elected, I will bring a deliberative, collaborative, and open-minded approach to policy and decision-making. A successful district is one that hears and respects input from all members of the community. I promise to research thoroughly, to express differences respectfully, and work to build consensus in an effort to balance the needs of our community. Our district is experiencing somewhat of a renaissance right now between the completion of construction projects and the fulfillment of foundation aid. The breadth of opportunity for the children of Port Chester has widened, and I'm so excited by the potential. My experiences as a teacher, parent, volunteer, and local taxpayer have prepared me to work with our superintendent, our board members, faculty, and staff to ensure that the children of Port Chester have access to the high-quality education that they deserve and need in order to succeed in our fast-changing world. Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for arranging this forum. Thank you to my fellow candidates for participating, and to all the viewers who are tuning in this evening, thank you for taking the time to learn about our qualifications and our goals. I hope you will consider casting your ballot for me on May 17th at your neighborhood elementary school. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Chrissy Lafria.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this forum tonight and for all the thoughtful questions. I'd also like to thank everyone who took the time to watch. This is an important election, and I'm glad you've made the effort to be part of the process. I am passionate about this village and our schools, and I want nothing more for them to continue to improve and for others to see the amazing things our students and our teachers are doing. Over the course of my first term, I have demonstrated that dedication and commitment. With a strong superintendent now leading our district, we are seeing so much progress, and we need to continue that momentum. I am proud of how I've conducted myself. Regardless of the circumstances, I have always maintained respect. I have welcomed all conversations and encouraged input from the community. After stepping in as president last year, I was nominated by my colleagues to serve as board president this year, an honor. The new superintendent and I have established a solid working relationship, and I've made it a priority to be present and visible at as many school events as possible. We've talked about the addition of board docs enabling greater transparency and giving the public access to virtually all documents, student academic performance data being presented publicly. Going forward, our partnership with Innovare will create even more transparency in sharing this data as we continue to shift to a data-driven culture and put a stronger emphasis on curriculum and instruction. I am proud to have helped see the massive bond project through without going over budget. I've stood by my conviction that we must assess where we are spending and that we are spending efficiently. I am proud of our efforts to improve communication, increase our social media presence, and the new website that is being designed. Our partnership with Syntax will assist in streamlining communication, as well as improving the public image of our district. Amazing things are happening in Port Chester, and we need to do a better job of sharing them. Being a member of the Board of Education is a big commitment and not one that I take lightly. I would be honored to continue to serve our community. Please vote to re-elect me, Chrissy D'Onofrio, on May 17th at your neighborhood elementary school. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from George Ford.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you to the League of Women Voters. It's great to be here with you again, 2 years in a row. To my fellow candidates, my fellow residents who have submitted questions and are Zooming with us for this extremely important election. It's imperative on May 17th that we show our full support for our children, our teachers, our staff, and our new superintendent, Dr. Enriquez, by voting yes for the budget. Again, a 0% change to the tax levy and a $9.5 million increase on the budget year over year. As I stated in my opening remarks, we have seen significant and positive changes in our school district over the last 10 months. With our increased foundation aid, federal COVID funding, and now a true leader at the helm, I see a skip in the step of our teachers, our aides, and our staff. We are making data-driven decisions, ones that will pay dividends in years to come. We are analyzing how and where improvements are needed. Tweaks and changes will lead to great things. We need to be positive. We should have fun in this community. It's time we push past the toxic environment that lingers behind the scenes. And most importantly, we need and should listen respectively to objective thinkers who want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I have knowledge of the budget. I know the people. I know the processes. I do the research, and I'm involved. As I stated last year, I have and will continue to support our teachers, our aides, and our staff. ensuring that they have the proper tools required to lead our children through this rapidly changing 21st century. On May 17th, at your home base elementary school, kindly vote yes for the budget and vote George Ford so we can continue our forward momentum. Thank you again.
Thank you. And with that, we conclude our evening. I'd like to thank our two timekeepers. I've done that job and it's a difficult one. So thank you for doing that for us. And thank you to the candidates for spending the time and energy to help your schools. And to the people still listening, please don't forget to vote. The schools your local elementary school will be open from 7 in the morning till 9 at night. And if you have any questions, if you can't remember something or whatever, go to the school's website. What is it? portchesterschools.org. Is that correct? Yes, portchesterschools.org. And you can get extra help. And with that, we will conclude the evening. Good night, everyone.